I am counting every blessing, letting go and trusting when I cannot see. I am counting every blessing.
Welcome to the ND 500 podcast. On today's show, we're exploring faith in action, where we hear the stories of ordinary people just like you who stepped out on faith to trust God. Let's listen in.
My name is Marguerite King Mitchell, and this is my story. When my son was in kindergarten, we lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and one day his school had Grandparents' Day, and on Grandparents' Day, students could bring their grandparents to spend the whole day with them. But my son had no one to bring to school because his grandmothers lived in different cities. One lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and the other one lived in Kansas City, Kansas. So on Grandparents' Day, he had no one to bring to school. But when he got to school, not only had students brought grandmothers, some had also brought grandfathers. So when he got home that evening, he was very sad. And he said, I don't have any grandfathers. So I tried to explain to him that all of his grandfathers, both of his grandfathers had died before he was born. And that's why he didn't have any around. But day after day, he came home very sad that he didn't have any grandfathers. So after this kept up for about a month, it finally dawned on me that this was really bothering him. So I didn't have any family pictures to show him because my older sister had all the family pictures, and somehow she had lost them when she moved from one place to another. She moved from Atlanta to Florida. So I didn't have any family pictures to show him about his ancestors. So I went to the library looking for picture books that were set in history, and because I wanted picture books, because I not only wanted him to hear the story, but I wanted him to see pictures of what kind of life his ancestors led. Now, I didn't know a specific title of the book, but I knew that when I saw the book, I would know that's what I was looking for. But when I got to the library, I couldn't find the type of book that I was looking for. Then I went to all the bookstores in town, and I still couldn't find what I was looking for. And I was looking for books that were set in the South, picture books. They're called historical picture books. And just to give some idea of, what life was like for his ancestors. So, since I couldn't find what I was looking for, that's when I decided to write the books myself. So, my first book, as I thought about what I was going to write in these books, I decided that my first story would be based on my own grandfather. Now, my grandfather owned, his dream was to own his own farm, and he worked hard until he, achieved his dream. But when I was thinking about the story, I wanted something that all children could identify with. So I remembered that my grandfather always told us the story about the barber who went from house to house cutting hair. And so I thought that would be owning a barbershop would be a realistic dream for someone who lived back in the time that my grandfather lived. So, and I wanted, to have a series of these books that would, talk about the different periods of when my son's ancestors lived. So when I had the concept, I just, went on a walk, and it was like God gave me the story to write. And I wrote the story. And then I tried to get it published. So I bought this book that talked about, I think it was Children's Writers and Illustrators Market, and it had the names and addresses of publishers to send your book to for them to consider it for publication. So I started sending off my story to publishers, and I would get rejection letters. And the first rejection letter I got, I was just just crushed because I knew there were no books like that out there. And I just felt that God had told me to write this book, even though I had never written a book before in my life. I just knew this was what I was supposed to do. But I was so crushed when I got the first rejection letter. I put my story away in the drawer, and I didn't send it out to anybody else. And one day I was looking through the drawer, and this was after about 3 or 4 months had passed. I was looking through the drawer, and I found the story that I had written. And I took it out, I read it, and it sounded all right to me. So I got out my book of Writers and Illustrators Market, and I selected another publisher, and I sent it off again. And I got another rejection letter. And back in the drawer, my story went, and it stayed for another 2 or 3 months until, I had built up enough courage to take it out and send it off again. And this kept up for about really a couple of years, me putting my story away and then getting up enough courage to take it out again. And then I started telling people about what I was trying to do, trying to get my book published. And I remember there was no encouragement. A lot of friends laughed at me and said, "You're never going to get your book published because you don't live in New York and you don't know anybody in the publishing industry." And people were telling me to just forget about it. They were saying, "You might as well forget about it and go do something else because nobody's going to publish your book." And they hadn't even read the book. And, I was crushed. And for a while, I listened to my friends, and I didn't send my story out anymore. And I kept walking and saying, "God, I know you gave me this story, and I know you want it published, and nobody is publishing it." And so, but then I started analyzing, and I would get good rejection letters. A lot of people get form rejection letters from publishers, but I would get these personalized rejection letters that would tell me how much they loved the book, but they still wouldn't publish it and saying it didn't fit in with their publishing plans or whatever. So, and I was saying, "God, well, what am I going to do? People like the book, but nobody's publishing it." And I kept my rejection letter. And I saw that, I went back and looked at them, and I saw that they were assigned by editors. And I was saying, well, if the editors like the book, then why aren't they publishing it? So then I went back to the book, and I don't know, I guess it was God telling me this. Instead of going down to smaller publishers, I went up. This listings was from Simon & Schuster, and they said they were not accepting stories unless an agent sent it to them or unless somebody they knew recommended them to the person. And so when I looked at this listing, I said, I'm not sending it to an editor. I'm sending it to the publisher, the person in charge. And I said, if he liked the story, then he'll tell him to publish it. So even though they said they weren't taking stories from people that sent stories in, I'd send it anyway. And I just think it was God telling me to just send it in and see what happens. I had nothing to lose. So after I sent in my story to the publisher of Simon & Schuster Children's Books, within 2 weeks, I got a call from an editor there. He had given my story to an editor and told her to call me, and that they wanted to publish my story. And I think of, what if I had given up when I got those rejection letters? What if I had given up when my friends laughed at me and told me that I wasn't going to get published? Simon & Schuster is one of the top companies, and But I think I had faith. I knew God wanted me to write this story, but I didn't know how it was going to get published. I just, kept sending it out and just having faith that one day I would get published. And because I didn't give up, when Simon & Schuster, that year, Simon & Schuster had a lot of famous artists, authors that year. And every year they put out a new book, a catalog that advertised their new books that were coming up for the year. And nobody knew me, right? I'm this new person whose books they were publishing. But my book, Uncle Jet's Barbershop, had the whole front and back cover. It was one continuous cover of the catalog. Then you open the catalog, and I had a whole page. My book had a whole page in the catalog. And, to me, that was nothing but God, because nobody knew me. Then, right after my book got published, all the people lost their jobs. The new management was brought in. So therefore, I had no advocate within the company for my book. But the book just took off. And, it's in school libraries all across the country. It was in bookstores. Just so many good things happened. And to me, it was letting me know that I didn't need, a person to advocate for me when I had God advocating for me. And year after year after year after year, Uncle Jet's Barbershop has continued to sell. And not only that, it has been reprinted in lots of textbooks, social studies textbooks, English language textbooks, and there are 3 kinds: social studies, English, and language art textbooks. The Federal Reserve Bank has even developed lesson plans about it. It has been sold in foreign markets all across the world. And the newest one that I saw when I got my last royalty statement was from Taiwan. It is in Chinese. It is Israel. I get emails from people all over the world telling me how much they enjoy the book and how it has generated conversations with them and their children about segregation and racial equality, and also about dreams and never giving up on your dreams and what it takes to achieve your dreams. And the latest thing is that a musical has been made out of Uncle Jet's Barbershop. And, it had a very good debut last year in Denver, where it played for a month. And even as we speak, the creators of the show are this week in New York meeting with producers who are interested in carrying the show across the country. So if you trust in God and believe that He tells you to do something, then you may not know how it's going to come to pass or what great things are going to happen because you did this thing. But if you just trust, you never know. It could be like Uncle Jet's Barbershop and go around the world.
I am